David points out a great illustration about his experience at that conference at the table, because the table is a place where we really kind of learn about ourselves, we learn about our faith, we learn about grace. And these last few weeks, as we've been looking at this, it's not just about what happens at the table, like, past the green beans or past the potatoes or whatever you have. It's where someone passes more than just that, because a part of you is shared when we gather at the table. And as we're making this move towards obviously big table moments like Thanksgiving, and some of you are worried about how that's all gonna go down this year, or you're missing someone this year, or you're looking ahead to Christmas and you're trying to figure out, like, how are we gonna engage in Christmas this year, and how is all this gonna happen, and where are we gonna go, and what are we gonna do? The table sometimes can be the most vulnerable place because it's where the real you shows up, right? People notice when your shoulders sag, or when your voice inflection changes, or when you laugh, or when you sound tired. It's when people notice when you're avoiding eye contact with them and you just kind of look, or you're kind of quiet, or you're reserved. You can get away with that at work. You can get away with that, in a lot of places. But when you're at the table with people that know you and people that love you, you can't get away with those things. Which is why we've said repeatedly, this is what happens, and this is why at the table sacred things take place, because it's where we slow down and we look people in the eye, and they're known and we're known, and it's where faith happens. Last week we said, let's be intentional about praying before meals. And some people are like, I've always done that, and other people have been like, oh, why did you have to do that? I avoid public praying whenever possible, however option I can. Because every time you pray for a meal, whether it's awkward, whether it's forced, whether you're just repeating something you heard someone say and was like, was that good? Did I do it right? No matter what it was, even if you did that, you're practicing public grace. It's a practice. It's a starting a new habit. It's engaging in ways, and you're practicing it with those around you. You're not performing, you're participating. Because praying before a meal is one of the simplest ways that your faith goes public. It's not dramatic, it's just real. Because you acknowledge in that moment, you acknowledge the giver of all good gifts, not just the gift. It's not just we're thankful for this, but the giver of the gifts. And that's so important in those moments. And so maybe this week as you practice this, maybe it was a child, maybe it was one of your children, maybe it was a friend, maybe it was a coworker, where they heard gratitude expressed to God out loud. So today we're gonna, again, take it one click further. We're gonna move a little bit further, because a table is where grace is shared. Not just food, but grace is shared. Now, grace is one of those words we use a lot around here especially, right? We sing about grace, we talk about grace. Some of you say grace before dinner, and we talk about that, but do we actually understand exactly what we're doing that? Because grace in its just very simplest form is just unearned kindness. It's not necessarily a spiritual word, although we use it for spiritual, but your bank also has a grace period. Your credit card statement has a grace period, so only like 15 days. Grace is just unearned kindness. I know you have never thought about that, but like your bank is giving you unearned kindness for 15 days. Just a little special kindness for that. Grace is that we talk about here is when love shows up and you know you didn't deserve it, you didn't do anything to earn it. It's the favor that Jesus gives you even if you failed, right? It's Jesus just didn't talk about grace, he shared grace. He gave grace away. He was a distributor of grace. He embodied it by the ways that he talked to people, and not just talked about people, because we can memorize the right words to say and we can tell ourselves, now when you're going into this situation, don't take the bait. Don't say it, right? But he embodied it. He showed it. And so today, we're gonna move forward, and we're gonna look at the story that Luke talks about. And Luke always wants us to see something. And in Luke, we have this story where there's this woman who we know is sinful. She is a sinful woman. And kind of like David's story, she finds herself in this room, and it's very, very awkward to start with. And he tells us one of these moments where we have this table and Jesus is at this table. And we have a table where people aren't exactly sure who should be there and who shouldn't be there. So in Luke chapter 7, verse 36, when one of the Pharisees, now this is reversed from some of the stories we've been looking at the last few weeks, one of the Pharisees this time invites Jesus to have dinner with him. So Jesus went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. So here's the setup. Jesus gets invited by a religious person named Simon. Nice house, respectable people, respectable crowd, polite conversation, very polite. And then it happens, verse 37. A woman, which woman? I don't know, but everybody knew that woman. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life, which basically means everybody talked about her, but nobody talked to her. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. Now, let's pause here for just a second, because this is where the story gets messy, and this is where the story gets real, and this is where all of our own insecurities and anxieties can kind of rise to the surface here. Because in that culture, the exact same as our culture, reputation precedes you. Reputation precedes you. And everyone thought they knew her story. Everyone had heard rumors about her story, and everyone had already preconceived notions and ideas about who this was. And for sure, this woman is not on the guest list. For sure. She was not supposed to be in this room. She was not invited into this home. But something in her said, I have to get to Jesus no matter what. And if he's over there, I need to get there. And I know what people are going to say. I know when I walk in, because I experience it every day in the market. I can hear the whispers. I hear the giggles. I see people do this. Oh, look away. She can feel that. She knows that. She walks in uninvited. We're confident there's whispers taking place. The homeowner, Simon, probably staring. Imagine you finally get Jesus into your house, and then this person shows up, and you're like, what are you doing here? And she kneels, not at the head of the table. This just goes from weird to weirder. 38. As she stood behind Jesus, she goes to his feet, weeping. She began to wet his feet with her tears. So this isn't like, oh, isn't this sweet? No, this is like the ugly cry. You ever done the ugly cry? This is the ugly cry. She's soaking his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair. Like, oh, I'm so sorry. I've got your feet all wet because I'm sobbing here. Then she kisses them. Then she poured perfume on them. Now, this isn't polite religion. This is raw, emotional faith. It's a gratitude that doesn't have a vocabulary. It's a thanks that's so deep, there's not words that can express and describe what she felt in her heart. It's a gratitude that also couldn't say, sorry, like you don't understand, I need to say thank you. Have you ever given someone a gift and they're like, thank you, thank you, thank you, and you're like, no, really, it was not that big. No, it was fine. It was just whatever it was. And they keep going on and on. And now everyone at the table is uncomfortable watching this. I mean, you picture this. You sit at the table and picture this. Like, okay, a woman comes in and starts like sobbing and then dries someone's feet with their hair and then puts perfume on them. I mean, that's uncomfortable. And everyone feels the awkwardness and is uncomfortable except for Jesus. And when you watch this, there's lessons that we can learn by just watching this, not even reading it, just watching this. Grace always makes religious people nervous because religious people want to know, what are the bounds of grace? How far can grace go? How far do we extend, hospitality in certain situations? Grace always makes religious people nervous going, what are I like it clean. Religious people like boundaries and clean lines. And so Simon is thinking, if this man Jesus, who I invited into my home, and this was about him, if he was really a prophet, he would know, a prophet would know who this woman really was. Because at some point he's thinking maybe he doesn't know, but then he's like, wait a second, he's a prophet, he would know. And all Simon can see is that this woman is sinful. But Jesus sees her story. And I think in this, Luke wants us to see this interaction because the table has a way of revealing what we truly believe about people and what our real beliefs are about grace. Because Simon grew up thinking that holiness, holy living, was separation from those things that were unholy. And Jesus said it's about a connection. And Jesus knows exactly who this person is. In fact, he tells them all the story. This is one of the great things I love about Jesus, because I think he's so incredibly intuitive, and he shows a wisdom and a depth to him that still to this day is astounding and rare. So you're in this room, this woman comes in, she does this thing. Jesus kind of collectively knows, I know what you all are thinking. And he flips it. And he starts in with this story, and he says, two people. Not talking about the woman. He starts in with the story. Two people owed money to a certain money lender. Two people owed money to a money lender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had money to pay him back, so the moneylender forgave the debts of both. Then Jesus asked this question. So I'm curious, which of them will love the banker more? Which of them will love the moneylender more? Simon, the owner of the home, goes, I'm going to take a guess here, but I would think it's probably the person who had the bigger debt forgiven. Jesus. Winner, winner. Yeah, obviously. And then Jesus flips over to the woman and says something remarkable. He says, your sins are forgiven. Your faith has saved you. Now go in peace. I think it's one of, if not the most, probably top 5 scenes, images in the gospel, because it's not about just a woman 2,000 years ago who sinned. It's about us. It's about me. And it's about you, and it's about what Jesus knows about you, who you really are, who you really were, what Jesus knows about me, who I really am, who I really was, what I've actually done, what you've done. It's a story about us. And the reality of Jesus knows who you really are and what you're really capable of. It's a story that lets us know that grace has this remarkable ability to break into places that's unexpected. The places that you and I least expect grace to show up. Grace has a place to get in, which is great news for us, isn't it? Because we think that we're so isolated because of what we've done, and we see grace showing up. We show it showing up at this dinner party that it wasn't supposed to. It was a religious event. It was a formal event. And grace didn't need permission to show up and enter, just like it doesn't need it today in this room. Because grace has the ability to walk into our nice, neat lives and remind us that we all are in need of mercy, that we all have a debt that we can't pay back. And the people at the table thought they were hosting Jesus, but it turns out Jesus was hosting them, and it was a potluck, and Jesus brought grace to share. And he told them, look, this is how relationships work. I think it's so interesting. Researchers at Harvard has this program on human flourishing program. And so they found people, this is what they discovered, that people who regularly share meals together, whether family, friends, neighbors, people that regularly, it's their group. It's their Tuesday lunch group. It's the family dinner on Wednesday. It's the Sunday group, whatever gets together, neighbors, all this. People that have a regular group that they share meals with report significant higher levels of trust, belonging, and forgiveness. In fact, one study in the Frontiers in Psychology found that sharing food increases empathy and cooperation more effectively than shared conversations alone. So if you want your kids to have more empathy and cooperation, feed them, sit with them, look in their eye. I think that's fascinating. What this is saying is that grace isn't just a spiritual idea. It's a human rhythm that's a part of human flourishing. And when you break bread and you engage with others around the table, something happens. It happens biologically and it happens emotionally. It makes you more gracious. If you want to learn how to forgive, don't start with theology. Oh my good gracious, start with dinner. If you have something between someone, don't start by reading a book. Start by passing food. And here's what I've learned and here's what I know, is that when you sit down with somebody where there's something, grace is awkward at first before it looks beautiful. You ever notice that? Grace rarely feels polished. It usually feels uncomfortable because real grace crosses a line. It moves us into places. It touches people that others avoid. It forgives people that others won't. And it invites people that others exclude. And that's exactly what this woman did. She broke through her own personal shame and she was shown love. Because Jesus met her there, and Jesus met her in her tears, not her theology, not even in her behavior. And some of you have experienced that kind of grace. You didn't deserve it, you didn't earn it. And Jesus met you anyway. And your stories matter because there's others in this room that wonder if that's even true or possible, which means your story matters. Because Jesus met you anyway, and you receive that kind of grace, and now you can't help but share it. And the table is this place where grace gets shared. This is why the table matters. And this is what's so easy to miss. Jesus didn't tell this woman just like, hey, she's forgiven. He told everyone else, not only is this woman forgiven, but she belongs at the table too. Because grace doesn't just change you, it changes the community of people around you. Because every table we sit at is an opportunity for that same kind of grace, where you choose to forgive rather than to retaliate, where you choose to listen rather than to judge, where you choose to include someone that other people overlook. That's grace going public. And maybe the most practical way that you can share grace this week is through your table. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be expensive, it just has to be intentional. It doesn't have to be a full meal, it could be a dessert. Because grace isn't about presentation, grace is about participation. It's where ordinary meals turn into moments of eternal significance. And you always leave better when you sit around the table with this. So this week, let's not just remember grace, let's practice it. Because the table isn't just where we eat, it's where this whole idea begins to be shared and experienced. So this week, whether you're with someone around, we want to share and experience the table. I find it interesting when I see these moments of the table here. This past weekend, I've had the opportunity to sit at some table with some really great people and had a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. And last night I was at a table that was outside because it's awesome outside. Yeah, it's changing. So, and there was a bonfire close to the table that I was sitting at. And so I got home last night and I smelled. I smelled like the bonfire. It was all over my clothes. It was in my hair. There's just this odor that's like, you meet someone who wasn't there and they're like, bonfire? Yep, bonfire. I think that's remarkable because I go back to the story. I thought about this story last night, and I knew we were going to be talking about this today. And I'm thinking about grace, and grace has an aroma, has a smell to it. I would imagine this happens every now and again. Last Sunday, I was leaving here, and there was one of you who's here today. You came up, and you gave me a side hug, and I think you had probably just put fresh perfume on. And I gave you a side hug, and last week I came home, and I changed clothes, and I was like, I smell like that lady that does that, and it sticks to you. And so I'm reading this story, I'm watching this story about grace, and I'm seeing this woman, I'm picturing her walking into this room and pouring out, and she wipes, she cries all over, and then she breaks her alabaster jar of perfume, washes his feet with his perfume. And I promise you, because I know it's true in my life, I promise you, every person that was at that dinner table went home that night and encountered somebody and goes, you smell like old lady perfume. You smell like bonfire. And every one of those people sat around that table, and what they experienced was so overwhelming to them. And then they came home, and they had the aroma of grace on them. Because when somebody smells you, it's so weird, right? Where were you, and who were you with? I was with Jesus. And the craziest thing happened. This woman came in. You know the woman? Was she lost? Yeah. And now she's found. And she poured us out, and what you smell on the fibers in my clothing is the smell of grace. And that grace, and do you have sense that just they bring back memories to you, right? I know for somebody here, like their grandpa wore Ralph Lauren Polo cologne like everybody did in the 80s and 90s, right? I mean, you could smell that a block away, right? For those of you who know, green bottle stuff used to come out. You splash a little on that, you'll smell for a week. You'll be good. Some of you had Old Spice, right? What was so many of these shaving lotions and stuff. You smell that. For me, I remember I've told this story before, but like my grandma had boxwoods outside her house, and every fall and spring, my dad would trim those boxwoods. And to this day, you smell boxwoods, and I visually am at my grandma's house because of the way our olfactory senses work. Smell takes us to places quicker than other places. There's more neuroreceptors. I remember when our daughter was passing, and my wife just asked if she could hold our daughter. And she relaxed and she calmed down because she could smell my wife, even though every part of her being she no longer was able to have. She had gone blind and she had gone deaf, but she retained smell to the very end. And that sense of comfort because she could smell her mom. Smelling has a way of taking us to a place that no other thing can do, because there are literally more neuroreceptors to our sense of smell than any other thing. You got one optic nerve. One. Smelling affects so many parts of the brain. And when Jesus has this perfume poured all over her brain, for the rest of their life, when they smell that smell, they remember grace. Fascinating enough, the story we last week with Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea at the burial of Jesus, guess what they brought there? Chanel number 5. It's the same perfume. And now we're breathing in grace. We're smelling grace. And we can't escape it because we've experienced it. And once we smell that, we can visualize it. And we remember that moment. And what Luke wants us to know is, as sure as shooting, you smell that smell for the rest of your life. I want you to remember the time that you experienced grace and you stepped forward and you said, God, I want to accept it and receive your grace. Because it's a story for us. And that's why the table matters. Because today you smell that. If you're having roast beef today, you smell that. Where do you go? The last time, maybe it's your grandma made it. You remember that time when you were accepted and you were loved. Because grace has a smell that brings us back to those moments to remember that, yes, there's been some decisions in your life that were, oh boy. And yes, you lost your cool, and yes, you responded poorly, and yes, that thing you did is unforgivable, and yes, and yes, and yes. But so is God's grace. So today, as we close today, I want you to just breathe in and breathe out the grace that maybe you need, or maybe the grace that you've received, and maybe you've forgotten about it. So as you make your way maybe to a cross today and you want to pray, we've talked about this a lot. Maybe some of you want to accept it deeper and you want to write on your card, I have decided today to accept grace, to follow Jesus. Write that, put your name and your email and phone number, and we'll contact you this week to help you with that. Maybe you want to take and light a candle because you just are like, God, I just need this in my life right now. Or maybe you just want to write a prayer request and have us pray over you today. We want to do that with you this week for sure. But as we begin to extend, we're going to sing a song, then I'm going to come back and we'll get out and we're going to take this meal together. And here's one of the smells for me. From the time that I was little, not so much the bread, but when you peel back the layer of that cup and you're getting ready to taste it, that smell of the juice, for me, that's what grace smells like. And so when Jesus says we do this in remembrance, we do. And I remember that Jesus' blood was shed for me. So we're going to respond. If you want to go and write prayer requests, or you want to write down that you've decided to follow Jesus, just like Anna did today. Anna, your story was beautiful. Thank you so much. If you want to light a candle, you're free to do this as we sing songs about this God who wants to be a part of our life and continually shows up in the moments that we need him most. Let's sing together.